Hello, my name is Dina Feldman. I'm an elementary supervisor where I oversee the Gifted and Talented program here in Edison Township Schools.
I am Doug Stokes. I am also an elementary supervisor, and I also co-oversee the Gifted and Talented program with Dr. Feldman.
We are going to go through some information for you to help you understand the changes to our program, as well as the new additions that we have, and to understand how we're enriching all students here in Edison Township. So first, we want to introduce our Gifted and Talented team. If you look here at your screen, we have Mrs. Riley, Mrs. Marzano, Mrs. Krant, Mrs. Colhep, Mrs. Emick, Mrs. Roldan, Mrs. Golias, and Mrs. Lerman. We have each teacher's email address as well as their affiliated school. So if you have specific questions regarding your child, please reach out to the Gifted and Talented teacher in your building. If you have questions about the program or anything else, please feel free to reach out to myself or Mr. Stokes.
And you can also reach out to your school's Gifted and Talented teacher also about the program, because they know about this program as well.
Okay, so we're going to go over our overview of our program, our enrichment for all, and then our specific Gifted and Talented program. So, program components. We have a few different components to address all Edison students' needs. So, our first layer is our enrichment for all. This is for all Edison Township Public School elementary students in grades K through 5. They will be provided in September with access to the Renzulli Learning Platform. The other piece to our program is a creative and critical thinking units, which are done in grades 3, 4, 5. We actually are going to be entering our third year of doing these types of units. They last for about 8 weeks. A Gifted and Talented teacher pushes into the classroom and works on creative and critical thinking skills. And then our final piece to our program is our Gifted and Talented Pullout program for eligible students in grades 3, 4, and 5.
Okay, our Enrichment for All approach is a change that we've made to our program to actually touch all of our students, as Dr. Feldman said, in grades K through 5. Renzulli Learning will be the platform that we'll be using in order to further develop our students in interests that they actually enjoy, or areas that they want to pursue to really enhance their learning. So how does that work? In the fall, every student will be taking the Renzulli Profiler, and this profile will identify, based on the questions that are asked, the interest areas of all students, their learning styles, and how they express themselves. And then what happens after that, Renzulli will come up with a program, and they'll push out menus and playlists and activities for all students to become engaged in. Also, students can also explore the database on their own and maybe pursue different areas that may interest them but did not come up as one of their strengths as a student. But once again, this is for every child, kindergarten through 5th grade.
And access to this program is during the school day at Teacher Choice, as well as they'll have access to it outside of the school time. So now we have our creative and critical thinking units. Like I mentioned earlier, we are going into our third year of doing these units. So in these units, it's for grades 3, 4, and 5. A Gifted and Talented teacher pushes into the classroom about once a week for about an 8-week cycle. And during that time, they engage students in low threshold, high ceiling activities, which allows students of all ability levels to engage in these really rich and exciting tasks. And these tasks focus on what we call FFOE. And you're going to hear that mentioned throughout this presentation. So when we talk about FFOE activities, we're talking about fluency, large numbers of ideas, flexibility, different points of views, originality, unique and unusual information, and putting things back in a new way, and then elaboration, giving more detail.
And as Dr. Feldman mentioned, you'll be hearing FFOE often throughout this presentation. To go back to the Renzulli Profiler that we'll be using for all students K through 5, that also builds on these FFOE concepts. So
now our Pull Out Gifted and Talented program. The criteria we are going to discuss is for our 2021-2022 school year. Due to our remote learning situation this year, we did not identify any new students for the 2020-2021 school year. However, we did some enrichment activities. We did our critical and creative thinking units in grades 3, 4, 5 that were done remotely. Our gifted program of previous identified students still continued remotely. And our gifted and talented teachers worked with some third graders as well throughout the remote environment. So again, this is for our 2021-2022 school year criteria. So first we have, here at Edison, we have very bright children. And we just wanted to kind of show you the difference between a bright child and a gifted learner. We're not going to read all of them, but just to point out a few. A bright child is interested, whereas a gifted learner is highly curious. A bright child grasps meanings. A gifted learner draws inferences. Again, these are just some differences. And here in Edison, we know we have so many bright children, and that's why we're doing the enrichment for all students.
And please note, that is for information only, just for you to look at how we identify bright children and gifted children. It does not mean that you go through a list and you try to make your child become that. That's just for information. Okay, our program structure. And this is for the gifted and talented pull-out program. Okay, students are assessed using the Cebiche test of creativity at the beginning of the year in the fall. So this will be in the fall of 2021. This assessment will be given in school. Parents do not have to do anything to set their child. We will be providing a testing window where every student in the district in grades 3, 4, and 5 will be participating in the Cebiche test of creativity. For those of you that are familiar with our district, in the past we have used the COGAT assessment. We are no longer using the COGAT. That is correct. We are no longer using the COGAT assessment. Instead, we have a multi-tiered assessment approach, and that starts off with the Cebiche test of creativity,
which we did administer this year with our current gifted and talented students to get an idea of the assessment, what scores look like, and to make sure that we understand. We also work very closely with the developer of the assessment for parent reports and what reports that we need in order to work appropriately with our students.
Yes, and once we'll explain the criteria in more detail in the next couple of slides, but this right now is just an overview of the structure. So once students are identified based on our matrix and the formula we have for determining a student's eligibility, students remain in the gifted and talented program throughout their elementary experience in grades 3, 4, and 5. They do not have to be reassessed if they get in third grade, again in fourth grade or in fifth grade. They're in the program for the year.
And with that, one of the changes, as Mr. Stokes had said in the beginning, we will be assessing students every fall in grades 3, 4, and 5. Whereas in the past, we only assessed at the end of second and at the end of fourth, thus giving students more of an opportunity each year to be identified.
And also what that means from a parent point of view, that means that if your child by some chance is not selected, they have other opportunities in grade 4. And if they're not selected in grade 4, they have opportunities in grade 5. What is key that we need to point out here is that this gifted and talented pull-out program, grades 3, 4, and 5, ends at the elementary level. It does not carry into 6th grade or middle school or even high school. And also this gifted and talented program is not used for student placement in any courses in middle school.
All right, so now we have the program components. Again, just an overview of what the program looks like for those students that have been identified. So similarly to the learning profile and enrichment for all, students now are going to choose projects that are based on their interests and likes and something that they'd like to do. So in these projects, the instruction is going to focus on advanced learning, executive function skills, which include critical thinking, communication, collaboration, time management, and creativity skills. Students in Edison, regardless of gift and talent or not, are in a classroom getting differentiated instruction. This is just building upon that and taking it a step further. Additionally, they're going to be able to work collaboratively with students across the district. Now, the structure of the program, students will work in person with peers in their classroom, and there'll also be opportunity to work via a Zoom or Google Meet with other students across the district. That's one thing that we're taking from this remote environment to kind of give students an opportunity to work with other students that they may not have an opportunity to interact with. However, they will still meet in person as well with a gifted and talented teacher and their peers. The other piece to that is they'll meet with a gifted and talented teacher twice a week for 40 minutes. And beyond that, they'll also be scheduled what we're calling office hours. Each child will be scheduled a weekly meeting for approximately 10 to 15 minutes, allowing the gifted and talented teacher to work individually with their child to continue to hone in on what the student needs to work with, developing their strengths.
Okay. The gifted and talented criteria, how is a student eligible for our gifted and talented program, is where we are going to next in this presentation. So at the end, we will actually be giving student examples of what a student may possibly do to further clarify how we will determine a child's eligibility. So as mentioned before, the Ceviche test of creativity is going to be our first assessment of this multi-assessment approach to identifying students.
And again, this is replacing the COGAT. So we will no longer be administering the COGAT. We're going to be, again, administering that Ceviche test of creativity. By using this assessment, it allows us, again, to assess annually rather than every other year, thus giving opportunity for more students to be identified for the program. And also, it allows us to administer in a short amount of time, allowing us to start the program when essentially, October, rather than having to wait.
Right, and just as a little caveat, the Ceviche test of creativity is exactly how it sounds, a test of creativity. There's really no preparation that can be done for this test of creativity, and once again, it is given in the school environment in the child's classroom.
And we'll talk more about how you'll get a parent report on how your child's performance on this assessment is.
Okay, the Ceviche test of creativity actually measures a student's ability for those FFOE concepts that we mentioned earlier: flexibility, fluency, originality, and elaboration. Students need to score a 70% or higher to be considered for the program, and that 70% score is what we call the creativity score, which is a child's originality averaged with their highest flexibility, fluency, or elaboration score. And we'll get into more details with that, but we have considered a child needs to score 70% or higher on the Ceviche assessment in order to be eligible for our program. Our next level of this multifaceted assessment approach will be the exact path diagnostic, and you should be familiar with the exact path diagnostic. We have been given these diagnostics to our students for several years now. The exact path diagnostic is given in ELA and also in math. And once again, students cannot prepare for this because every assessment with the diagnostic is different because it's how a student actually answers questions. So it's what we call adaptable software, so it adjusts to that student's level. A student, we'll give you more details, but once again, a student needs to score in one of the top national percentiles in order to be considered for the gifted and talented program.
And that was a change from, in the past, we used to use the STAR. Now we are using the exact path diagnostic. Students did take that this year. Some were remote, some were in person. So they will be taking that in September.
And if needed, after we look at a student's Ceviche score and we look at their exact path diagnostic in math and or reading, we will then, if needed, give the student a performance assessment, which will be given by our gifted and talented teachers, as well as a gifted behavior rating scale, which will be given to the student with their current teacher and last year's teacher.
So as we mentioned before, you will receive notification of the results of that Ceviche test of creativity with an analysis and a participation letter, whether or not your child is eligible for the program. and that we would say within 2 weeks. We will be communicating everything through our parent portal in Genesis. In addition to that, we will provide an assessment window timeline. The classroom teacher does give you an idea of when they'll be administering the exact path, and you'll also know about the week when they will be administered the Cebiche test. So now we're going to get into more specifically that criteria. And all this information is on our website for you to kind of look at and print out and take a look. So again, we're talking about a multifaceted, multi-tiered approach to identifying students, not just looking at one assessment, but looking at the child as a whole and looking at different aspects of their educational journey. So the first thing, as we talked about, is the Cebiche test of creativity, where they have to score overall creativity score of 70% or better. That's the first layer to even be considered. And again, that creativity score is the average of their originality and fluency or flexibility and elaboration to come up with that. And again, in that Cebiche report that you receive, it breaks down each category and tells you how your child performed in that category.
Okay, the second criteria is used to narrow down pool of candidates even more. So what does that mean? The Cebiche test, the student needs to score 70. If a student scores a 70% or higher on the Cebiche test, we then look at their exact path diagnostic data. And what we've done to make this more flexible is we are taking the child's current exact path data. That means we're not going back to last year. We are going to use the data in the fall to determine a child's eligibility using the diagnostic. But what we've done is we're going to take the student's highest score in either reading or math to benefit every student. So as you can see on what is being shared with you right now, for the reading minimum percentile rank, a 94% or higher, or the math minimum percentile rank of 95% or higher. So those are the minimums that we will use, and we'll take the higher score for your son or daughter.
And again, just to reiterate, they have to satisfy the 70% on that Cebiche, as well as one of the exact path diagnostic minimums to be considered. So if they don't, they're not eligible. If they do and they don't have the points, the next two layers are that performance assessment given by the gifted and talented teacher, and then that gifted behavior rating scale given by the current teacher and their previous year's teacher. And we're going to talk specifically now about the point system, because we mentioned it a few times that they need to have 70 points.
We have created a matrix that will help clarify this even further.
And again, this is something in the past we have not shared. We are sharing everything so that you have the information on how we're looking at your child. And that, so you're aware of all the criteria as well. And again, this is available on our website, and it's linked in the presentation.
Okay, so as you can see, the first assessment that we use in this multifaceted approach is the Cebiche test of creativity, as we have mentioned several times. As you can see, there's a different point total for students as they perform on this. So if you look at over from the right, a score of 70% or higher, that is the minimum. So if a child scores a 70%, they will receive 40 points based on the Cebiche test assessment. And if you follow that along, as you can tell, as students perform better on the Cebiche test of creativity, they will receive more points. With the highest being, if a student scores a 95% or higher on the Cebiche test of creativity, they will receive 65 points. Up above, we have mentioned a student needs to score 70 points in total to be eligible for our gifted and talented program. So that student, if they scored a 95, would already have 65 points, but it's still not 70. So therefore, we need to go to the exact path diagnostic to figure out what will be, if the student will meet that exact path diagnostic criteria. As you look down, you will see we have the point totals and the national percentile ranks for exact path data. We have it for both reading and math, and just to reiterate, we will take the highest score out of those two assessments from Exact Path data. So go ahead.
So now we're going to get into scenarios because it'll make more sense with the scenarios to go over what, if need be, the next two categories. If your child satisfies the first two criteria but doesn't have that 70 points, what do we do then? If your child meets the first two criteria and has that 70 points or above, then they're eligible. So we're going to get into the scenarios that show you what could possibly happen based on student performance.
And please note, these are just scenarios to help clarify our system for determining eligibility. Each child is looked at individually. So we don't expect every child to fall into one of these four scenarios. Each child is looked at independently.
So our first scenario is we have the students take the Cebiche test of creativity, and student A scores that 95%, which is our highest percent. They earned 65 points for that. We go down and look at our second criteria that must be satisfied before we even continue, which is our Exact Path diagnostic. This student is the 99th percentile on math, and we chose the math because that was the higher of the two, earning that student 20 points for that. So we take the 65, add it with the 20, and that's 85 points. So the student A has successfully met the qualifications for the Gifted and Talented program. So no additional assessments would be needed for student A because they satisfied the first two criteria and earned over that 70 points.
Okay, scenario B. Student B scores 85% on the Cebiche test of creativity. This earns that student 55 points according to the matrix. We now need to look at that student's diagnostic scores from the fall. The student scored a 94th percentile score on the Reading Exact Path. We chose the Reading Exact Path because it was the higher of the student's two diagnostic scores. That 94th percentile earns that student 10 points. Student B has met the first two criteria, the Cebiche first filter and also the diagnostic, for a total score of 65 points. However, this student needs 70 points to be eligible for the Gifted and Talented pull-out program in grades 3, 4, and 5. So therefore, we will now go to those other assessments that Dr. Feldman was talking about earlier. And the first one is a performance assessment that will be given by the Gifted and Talented teacher. And in this case, that student earned 9 points. And then also, we will give the Gifted Behaviors rating scale to this to the child's teachers, the current teacher and last year's teacher, and that child earned 6 points on that. Therefore, student B has earned 80 points from all criteria. This student needed to go to all four assessments, but still met to 70 points by scoring 80, so this student qualifies for the G&T program.
Thus, no additional assessments are needed. So now we have another scenario. So scenario C, this student, they score a 70, which is our minimum on the Cebiche test of creativity, earning that student 40 points. They score a 97th percentile in math on the Exact Path diagnostic, the higher of the two assessments, earning that student an additional 10 points. So this student now has 50 points. They have satisfied the first two criteria. So they've met the 70% or higher on the Cebiche, and they've earned the 94 and 95 percentile or the math or reading, again, taking the math, the higher of the two. But they only receive 50 points. So we move on to the next two assessments. That performance assessment given by the Gifted and Talented teacher, where this student earns 6 points. And then the Gifted Behaviors rating scale given to their current teacher and previous year teacher, earning that student 8 points for that assessment. So this student has only earned 64 points. This student did not satisfy the 70-point requirement to be eligible for the Gifted and Talented program. So this student is not eligible for the current school year. If this was a third grade or a fourth grade student, they will be reassessed the following school year to determine eligibility again. So it's just for that current school year they are not eligible.
However, even though this student is not participating in the Gifted and Talented pull-out program, they will still be participating in the critical thinking units from the Gifted and Talented teacher, pushing into that child's classroom, and also they will have the Rensselaer platform to continue to build on where their interests lie.
And additionally, all of our teachers apply differentiation strategies in the classroom to really enrich support and help each child achieve to their highest potential.
Finally, scenario D. Student D scores 75% on the Ceviche test of creativity. That earns that student 45 points. That student has met the first criteria. We now look at that student's exact path diagnostic scores. The highest score for this student is the 90th percentile score on the math exact path diagnostic. Unfortunately for the student, that 90th percentile does not earn the student any points, and that student did not meet the second criteria, so therefore no further assessments will be given because that student did not meet the first two criteria. This student is not eligible for G&T services for the current year only, and this student will be reassessed in the following fall.
So again, those are our criteria for the 2021-2022 school year. The few changes we highlighted are we have replaced the COGAT with the Ceviche test of creativity. We also now provide enrichment for all students in grades K through 5 through that Renzulli Learning Platform. Students, once identified and eligible for the Gifted and Talented program, it is a full year program. There's no ELA, engineering, or math. It is a full year. Once students have been identified, they are in the program until they leave us from elementary. We are assessing students every year in grades 3, 4, and 5, which is in contrast to when we would only assess in second and in fourth grade. In K through 2, students will again have access to that Renzulli Learning Platform, as well as differentiated strategies and learning within their classroom through the classroom teacher. We are potentially looking to expand, but as you know, we grow and learn, we always try different things as well.
And students that are currently in our Gifted and Talented program, they are remaining in our Gifted and Talented program. They do not have to be reassessed in the fall. They are currently in our program.
As we started this presentation, we want to thank you for taking the time to watch this and get to understand our Gifted and Talented program as well as the changes. We have the teachers' emails as well as their locations, so if you have questions about your individual child and the program, please feel free to reach out to them or myself and or Mr. Stokes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.